Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of Severance Season 2, Episode 9, After Hours. I'm going to break my review into 4 parts. We'll start with everything going on with Milchick, then we'll go to Mark, then Dylan and Helly, and then Irving. Now, we go with Milchick, who is with Miss Wong, where we finally learn her first name, which is Eustace, and he says that today marks the end of her Wintertide Fellowship. So she is given actually what's similar to Harmony had, where she had her blueprints hidden in, which was a Jane Egan bust when she did the Fellowship. And this is the year of vision, we learn, for the Fellowship. We also learn that she'll be moved out of her parents' house and her bed will be moved to the Gunnel Egan Empathy Center, which is in basically Norway. And they're going to send her to steward global reforms. I don't know who Gunnel Egan is. We haven't heard that name yet. And she's actually upset she's not finishing the quarter. But you can see Milchick is relieved. Basically has her give a material sacrifice for this betterment. And it's the ring toss game that she was always distracted by. And you can see how much Milchick just really doesn't like her. And says again and has her bash it. So this is the hypocrisy of Milchick as well, where he gets mad at a lot of his higher-ups, but he's still pretty brutal to Mrs. Wong. But it's interesting because Miss Wong is part of the 3 characters here who feel like they get this kind of send-off departure, and probably for most of them temporary, but that would be Miss Wong, Dylan, and Irving. And Miss Wong going on this shuttle makes you feel like we might not see her for a while until we see what's going on with her with those global reforms. Now, what happens here is we see the testing floor again for a bit, and Dr. Maurer has this lumen band-aid on his head where Gemma whacked him. And we're seeing he's watching Gemma still, but he also sees that Cold Harbor is stuck at 96. So this is where he calls Drummond, and Drummond gives Milchick an earful. He says this is your fault. And I love when Milchick finally speaks back to him and says, "I have followed protocol, Mr. Drummond, but I thank you for your remonstration." And this rubs Drummond the wrong way. He says a needlessly complex word for a simple idea. So this goes to that part of race that has been alluded to with Milchick, the storyline, where it started with the blackface Kier, and now it's going to where they're trying to limit this black man and him sounding educated. They keep putting him down for this. So that's why you see Drummond's harshly saying apologize for the word. And he pushes him further by making him say sorry multiple times. And finally Milchick fully sticks up to him and says, "Devour feculence. It means eat shit, Mr. Drummond," which was a great moment. And he calls him out too and says, "It's not my fault Mark Scout isn't here. What he does when he's not at work is your responsibility," explaining his job is the severed floor. This doesn't have to do really with him. So I really liked Milchick's story in this episode. It gets that nice payoff of him sticking up to Drummond fully here. And it alludes to in a weird way when he's on the phone with Mark later in the episode and him looking at that painting and Mark telling him that life's supposed to have a balance. Isn't that what Lumen's all about? And that it's all just not about work, which it seems like Milchick is a character where his life is about work. So this struck a chord with him, especially at this moment. That makes me think also that something with Milchick in the finale might be him setting him up for either taking a break from Lumen, leaving. I don't really know, but there's definitely something to that that's important. So I feel like maybe the wrapping of Miss Wong's story this season was a little rushed. So I didn't love that, but I did like how Milchick's story in his struggling where he stands had a nice little payoff here. Now let's go to everything with Mark. Now Mark tells Devon her plan is a mistake. He's like, we can't trust Cobell. Devon has a great funny line where she says back, "I'm sorry. The wind was whistling over the hole in the back of your skull. Did you just call my plan a mistake?" So that was really funny. But where my frustrations lie in this episode with Mark is that when Cobell shows up, Mark just acts like Outie Mark, like fully. I don't feel like he's any different. And it's weird because later in the episode when he triggers back into his Innie, there's no problem with his chip in this cabin and he just acts like Innie Mark. So I feel like if I'd watched this episode after season 1, it'd feel like the same guy. I don't feel like he went through any process. So this was really disappointing to me, and they didn't show enough of his mindset after having this whole thing of Ragabi flushing the chip. Just nothing really changed here, and that was really weird and frustrating. It felt like there was an elephant in the room that wasn't being addressed. But Cobell will inform them about Cold Harbor, and she's saying if Mark completed Cold Harbor, she's already dead, talking about Gemma. But Cobell gives him a good tip to actually call Milchick, because she's like, if he suspects chicanery, he will lock you out of the building. So that's why he will call Milchick, and that's where he talks about getting back to his life and wanting a day off for his life, admitting he's not sick. And he hits that chord with Milchick, like I was talking about, with work is just work. And he gives him his word he'll be there the next day, which I do think he will be when they have a plan set here with Cobell and Devon. Now, Cobell will sneak Mark into the cabins. They make it look like Devon is one of James Egan's girls, I guess, so this must be a normal thing. Now, Miss Cobell will tell the security girl a code talk saying, Miss Marsha White, 9th floor. So she goes, specialties department. She's like, I'm looking for a gold thimble. So this is important too because the episode's titled After Hours, which was a title of a Twilight Zone episode, the character being Miss Marsha White. And in that Twilight Zone episode, it's about that woman goes to a department store and finds out the 9th floor isn't real. She discovers she's actually a mannequin that lives as a human sometimes. So this can get your brain kind of running here of like, where are they going with this? And it's definitely going to connect to Gemma somehow, or even Miss Cobell and what's really going on with her character. So I'd love to hear your theories on that. And that she's alive line with Gemma hinting at, like I talked about, that line being from Bride of Frankenstein, being brought up again this episode makes me think that they're just making with Cold Harbor another Gemma that's full Kieran kind of consciousness in her, and that she's going to be like this monster that's brought to life. So if they're alluding to that with the Twilight Zone episode as well with the mannequin, I think we're kind of getting a connection there. So I'll have to hear your theories on that. And we'll see, leading to that she's alive line being brought up again, Innie Mark being greeted by Devon in the cottage. And she's like, do you remember the last thing you said to me? And it closing out on Cobell's face just shows me that it's Innie Mark seeing Miss Cobell confused at what the hell's going on and that he's going to have to work with her now. But it still just feels so strange what they're doing with Mark here. And it's just not totally working for me because it feels like just the same guy. I don't understand what the whole point of the reintegration was and the flushing out onto the chip, if anything changed at all. So just felt off. Now let's go to Dylan and Helly's story. We see Helena doing laps before work, has his breakfast with her father, and he doesn't eat, and he's just gonna watch her eat this egg. It reminded me of the Egg Bar Social, seeing an egg in this show. And he's like, I wish you take them raw. Don't know what that means, but she says, we're seeing to Mr. Bailiff, which is Irving. So she's obviously been informed by Mr. Drummond that he's figuring things out and is on to them. Now that's all we saw of Helena this episode, but not the last we see of James, which we'll get to. But Helly storms into Milchick's office and is like, where's Mark? It's the second day in a row he's not in, so she's worried about him because the last time she saw him, he had a nosebleed. You see Milchick calls her Helly R, and she's like, don't you mean Helly E? And the reason she says that is because she obviously knows her real identity now. Now, before we go back to Helly, we'll see with Gretchen here and Dylan. Gretchen's wearing an emergency responder 911 outfit that has fire, EMT, and police on it. So I don't know if she just gets a part of all that. She works for all of those departments or just one of them. We don't know specifically, but she's obviously an emergency responder. But she confesses now that she kissed Outie Dylan's Innie to Outie Dylan, and he's pissed. You know, like I said, this is like having an affair. And she's like, he reminds me of how he used to be. Like I had said, the reason why she's falling for Innie Dylan. And he says, I request you don't follow me there, talking about work. And he's like, and you used my own body to cheat on me. He says, since I have no way of knowing if that is happening or not, maybe I just go quit and I just end his existence. So you already feel that energy being built up in Outie Dylan, which will transfer over, I think, a little bit into Innie Dylan. And it's a nice setup to Outie Dylan probably being down with resigning with Innie Dylan's request form. But you see, she'll still go to Innie Dylan to be honest with him about this. And she's like, I told you about us, which was a great line. This wild concept of someone cheating on somebody with the same person. And you see, it's really sad because Innie Dylan's like, Gretchen, my life started when you came here. I have nothing else. I have this and pencil erasers. And he proposes and made her a ring. So you're seeing the effect it's having on Innie, just feeling love. And this relates a lot to Irv's storyline too, and how they really embrace it, because what else do they have down there, and how much love affects just even in Innie's life like it would in Outie. Now, Helly will see Dylan and say, you should keep the ring, give it to someone you meet down here. He has a funny line where he's like, it's just O&D and the goat people. So I thought that was really funny as his options, but she's like, hey, you know, there's probably more. And he's like, she's my wife, talking about Gretchen. But Helly says she's not your wife. No one would treat the one they love the way she is treating you. Like all the Outies treat us, like everything's for them. Dylan says, okay, what is there to do about it? At the end of the day, we are stuck down here with no life and no family. And she brings up Irv and is like, he's your family and he gave you basically this mission. And Dylan's like, you know what? It's your fault we're down here at all. And if we're so different from Outies, how come we couldn't tell when you were gone? And she's like, Irving could. And he's like, Mark couldn't. So really harsh from Dylan saying that to her. Just yuck. But what annoys me about this scene and just feels so like not Severance, like missing on these little cracks here in this episode, is the whole story was him being secretive about getting to meet his Outie. And this is a huge privilege the other ones don't get. But what happened to the scene where Helly first would react to this and be like, wait, you've been lying to us this whole time and meeting your wife and Outie? Like, hello, they just totally skipped it. So absolutely crazy to me. And that really pisses me off because that's been a storyline going the whole season. And to not have that confrontation here and skipped over just felt wrong. But Helly will take matters into her own hands, grab Irving's instructions. I like they show a close-up during this of the hang in there poster of Dylan. It's a nice callback to last year's penultimate episode and them being on a mission like Helly is now. And Dylan is at the same time putting his Innie resignation request in. You see he's checking off every emotional reason for resignation. But Miss Wong says, I'm sorry, Dylan G, I should have facilitated better. He says it's not your fault because at the end of the day, he knows she's just a kid and she's obviously alluding to how she handled watching over him and Gretchen in their sessions. And like I said, it feels like a departure for Miss Wong going in the shuttle and for Dylan about to go up that elevator to his Outie Dylan, who's very angry right now and will not want to be there. I don't think it's obviously the end of either of these characters in the show, but it might be a little break and maybe a not in the finale kind of situation. Now you see Helly's trying to memorize the directions from the note, and James shows up and he's like, you tricked me, my Helly. Helly R is like, what the hell? Like, what? But I feel like James has found out now about Helena sleeping with Mark and her being sneaky. And I think there's something else he found out about Helena that we don't know, that she's also planning and he caught on to. So we'll see. And that will probably be a big part of the finale. And I worry for Heliar if James wants her kind of turned off completely. Now let's go to everything with Irving. You see that Irving sees Bert is waiting for him. And Bert reads his notes on Lumen out loud, saying that may also be connected to several recent disappearances or deaths. Goodman may have participated as a low-level Lumen enforcer or goon. And you see that Bert's like mentioning how they never used words like that. He's like, with Lumen, it's a very specific language. And that reminded me and triggered me about Milchick here, and that he was doing the right thing in how he was talking. Again, it was just kind of racism used against him. And Irv's like, I know I was wrong. I know you're not with them. So Bert says, I want you to go on a ride with me. Now, what frustrates me about this story is we don't really know Outie Irv that well at all. We never really had much from his perspective besides him with his dog and doing his paintings. And so we don't know his opinions on all this, but we know he's been looking into everything messed up Lumen's been doing. And for him to just tap into what felt like fully Innie Bert in this episode felt off. Like, I felt this love. I really enjoyed it. So can we get an explanation of how he's feeling that love so much and that he would put over his intentions as his Outie Irv? Like, why is this being ignored that he found all this information, he's not more angry about it, and he's just willing to leave and have this sunset ending? That was very, very frustrating. But see, Bert in the car will tell Irv he never hurt anyone. He said he just drove people places and didn't ask what happened to them. So he probably just turned a blind eye to whatever was going on. And when Irv asks is that what today is, that's obviously not the same situation. This is Bert actually looking out for Irv because he knows his Innie fell in love with his Innie. He gives him a train ticket. He's like, this line goes as far as you can go. I can't know where you get off and you can never come back to Kier. And he's like, well, won't Lumen come after you? He says, you asked me why I'm severed. I like that I could be innocent again, a part of me, but then my innocent part fell in love with you. And Irving's like, I want to remember it. I've never been loved before. So we know this Irving, Outie Irv's a lonely guy. And he's like, don't you want to know how it felt? And Irving's like saying he's ready multiple times. So it makes me think he's a guy who was willing to go full into his Innie mode. And Bert's just like, we can't. And Irv has this moment. He leaves, but again, where is Isabelle's side, especially if he's rejected by Bert now? Like, he's just caving, and I know it's dangerous with Lumen after him, but I wanted to know more about Outie Irv before this happened. This felt like a cheat to me, and it just doesn't make sense, a guy who'd look into all this stuff and knowing how messed up they are, to just roll over and fully act like his Innie when it needed to be. So very, very frustrating. And though it was like nice and beautiful in a way, it just didn't feel earned in that sense either. So there was a lot of cracks in this episode, like I pointed out, with Mark feeling like he wasn't even reintegrated, with Helly not having that confrontation with Dylan about him lying to them all season, and with Irv acting more like Innie Irv than Outie Irv, I would imagine, because we don't even know what Outie Irv is like, but how would he have been so in love with Britt and just ignore all the information we do know he was spying into? So really, really frustrating. So I'm going to give this episode, overall, for it still being enjoyable, and I like the stuff with Milchick felt really earned, I'm going to give this episode probably a 7.6. But again, now all of a sudden I'm worried about this show, which I've never been, where last episode was the weakest, but I thought that would just be like one little case. But this just felt sloppy, and that's just not like Severance to me to have all these cracks. So I'm frustrated. I hope the finale's good. I think it will be good, but I don't like that the show's starting to do this. This should not been a part of the show, so I don't know. I just have some asterisks now coming for Severance, so I don't like that, but I'm curious what you guys thought down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Make sure to give me your theories as well. Really interested to hear what you think on this episode, because I am so conflicted. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of White Lotus and Handmaid's Tale that's coming out soon. And I'll see you next time.